Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our session, Improving Enterprise Architecture Management Data Quality by using LeanIX Surveys. So we are really excited to be here, to have the chance to talk to you and give you a little bit of background and overview on how did we introduce LeanIX at EVN. So we started with it a little bit more than a year, and how we use the surveys. Before we start, I think we don't need to say a lot about us. Basically, I'm now with the IT business for more than 20 years, and the last, meanwhile, close to 5 years working with EVN. And from a personal perspective, married, having 2 kids, and fits also very well. Architecture is a lot about communication, about talking to each other. My kids are meanwhile 12 and 14, so that's a really good practice for discussing, for argumenting, also to have some argumenting discussions about unpredictable, irrational things, but it's a really good practice for the company. So Matthias, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, also from my side, a warm welcome. Actually, we shared quite the same career and experience in previous job assignments. So we only departed for 1 year, and then I was happy to say Christian joined EVN. So we are together again and working on the same challenges. And yeah, hope there's something in there in the presentation, and wanna tell you something how we dealt with surveying.
Okay. So what do we have on the agenda quickly? First of all, we would like to give you a little bit background on where we're working, so about the company, about EVN. Also what have been the architecture drivers, why do we have an architecture team at EVN, and why did we decide to use LeanIX? So just the whole story to give you a little bit of context in which we're working. And then some more details about how did we start with LeanIX, some use cases on how we use the survey feature, and then also how did we integrate some other use cases. And at the end, we'll also have some time for Q&A. So talking about EVN, some of you might know it's an energy utilities company. We are based in Lower Austria. Just to give you some rough numbers, I'm not reading over those, but from an area perspective, it's the biggest state in Austria. From a population, we are the second biggest. We are very well known in Austria, especially for the energy sector. So we are doing a lot of energy business, electricity, gas, from producing, selling, also trading. We also do other areas like hydropower, wind power, photovoltaic, and we are also doing in the grid business. And we are not only doing that in Austria, we're doing that in several countries. So as you can see on here, we are in 6 countries doing that. What else do? We also do environmental services, like drinking water supplies and the wastewater disposal. In many countries, especially in Europe, but that's more on a more project-based scenario. Some high-level figures, we have a revenue about 2 billion euro. We have worldwide close to 7,000 employees, in Austria around 2,400. And the IT in Austria, we are around 130 people right now. We also have in some other countries IT colleagues, but the main department is definitely in Austria. One last slide I wanted to show, for those who don't know, Austrians also know how to build nuclear power plants. We just don't turn them on. So quite some time ago, we have built a nuclear power plant, but then the decision was made in Austria to not turn them on. The reason why I bring it on is EVN, meanwhile, owns that nuclear power plant, and it's actually used also as event location, and you also have the possibility to visit that. So it's pretty interesting. It's the only nuclear power plant you can really visit also from the inside, so for those of you who might be interested in that. Yeah, with that, I'll hand over to Matthias.
Thank you. So actually what I wanna start with is what were the main architecture drivers. So even before we started our LeanIX journey, there was enterprise architecture in place, but it wasn't very successful. And luckily, I would say those 4 points listed here were main drivers that helped us. It's a lot of work, but it gave us an extra boost. So one thing is Definitely application strategy. So what does it mean? There are a lot of things coming up, for instance, SAP S/4HANA, just to mention one thing. So shaking up the landscape, and it was very important for us to get a clear overview on the applications and also utilize LeanIX basically to draw some scenarios and see how the landscape is going to evolve. Then, of course, I think GDPR, I haven't found anyone in IT so far who likes that topic, but still it is there. We have to deal with it, and it was very important to get an idea where is data, especially where is sensitive data, personal data, where is it traveling through the systems, to get clarity on that. And on top, of course, risk management. It was also mentioned in the previous session. Very important to have an idea what are the critical systems, what to do if certain technology components within the stack fall out of service, how to handle them. And this is really a good approach to get visibility on those. On top, we also, as a utility company, have some legal things we have to consider, like, for instance, Netz and Informationssicherheitsgesetz. Also another thing we use to get more clarity on security areas, really having control on our identity access management, but also if there's any role-based control within the applications. So if you look at that, and just to give you an idea, Christian showed that we are multiple companies, sub-companies. At the moment, and this is just the current state, we roughly have about 700 applications, 1,400 servers in the system. So within the team, we are more or less 3 members dealing with that area, but it doesn't really equal out to 3 full-time employees. So what that means is also they have some project assignments and other work to do, so they cannot fully focus on the topic. And I think historically, one reason why the initiatives failed was really saying, well, it's just a small group of people trying to deal with that, but it's not working. They always were running to get that information, and as soon as it was in the system, it was outdated again. So our approach was really, we need to get a shared approach. We need to get it out into the company. And that means from a LeanIX perspective, I don't know who's new here to the topic. Basically, it's only 3 different ways you can see it. You have a viewer, you have more or less a contributor, and you have admin. And what we said is clearly we want to hand out right access basically to the business people, to IT people. We are not afraid of them entering information. We are happy if someone is contributing. And definitely what is helping here is survey information. So why LeanIX? So we also had a closer look to other vendors, and what was important is really say we want to get the people use the tool, so it's very important to have an intuitive user interface. We don't want to spend long time having training efforts, so typically if we run a session half an hour or 1 hour, it's very easy to understand and to use the tool. That's very important. Also keep in mind that people are using the tool sometimes infrequently, so they don't deal all the time with it. So that's important. And of course, on top of it, collaboration features. And what is also very important, that it comes with very nice reporting features out of the box, so you can present the information you have within the system. So basically, where did we start? If you look at that view, you will see it a couple of times when you deal with LeanIX. So the main, they called it fact sheets, and those are the areas where we started. So central piece, of course, the applications, then also tying it to business applications, user groups, but also the IT components underneath supporting those applications, and also some tech stack, which is more or less a logical grouping of the IT components you have. And what was the starting point? Basically saying, well, we have information that is spread around the systems. You see some screenshots there. You have some things in SharePoint. We have it partly in some ITSM tools. It is in some Excel sheets. So what do we do? Basically, we first try to condense those lists and start with really trying to get a clean list of applications as a first step.
Good. Then to the Surveys. So as Matthias mentioned, we had an imported list of applications, which was quite a big list where we even weren't sure if all those existed. So what we now said, okay, we would like to use the survey feature to spread out some information, or to spread out information to people that we have now the list and that we need to get some feedback. For those of you who don't know the survey feature maybe that well, that's just the general process for sure, but it still want to go through because there are some LeanIX specifics what you can do, which I just wanted to quickly mention. So first of all, for sure you start with creating a survey. So you define your questions, you define your answer options. That's something that you can already do within LeanIX. And more or less, it's very similar to other survey tools that you might know, which are available as SaaS solutions. Maybe not that many different type of questions, but the main ones are there that you require. In addition to normal questions like checkboxes, radio buttons, and those things, what you can also do is to include pieces or parts of the fact sheet itself. So if you would like people to update like names, descriptions, life cycles, you can also say you want to include those, and those would then show up directly in the survey. The second step is then basically you say, whom is the survey targeted for? And that's the really great thing here. You can really say there are certain applications I want to have in, like what I will show then is, you can say, I want to do a survey for applications. I want to send it to certain responsible people who are mentioned on there within a subscription. And they can really narrow down which fact sheets you want to get information for. And then in step 3, if you start the survey, you can send out the mail, or will get automatically sent out by LeanIX to the appropriate people, and they will get a customized link or specific link where they can click on, and they will get the server exactly for those fact sheets they are responsible for. Yeah, then people would fill out the survey, and then so the last part is then to process the results. So that means if you had questions which update the fact sheet directly, that information would be already in. If you have other questions, you would need to export that information to Excel and then do with that information whatever you need to do. So what did we do in the beginning? The very first survey that we did was really targeted to people who had at least 10 applications assigned, because for many of the applications, we didn't even know who is responsible for them. So many team leads got them assigned. So we sent out to about 20 people a survey where we said, okay, is the application still relevant? Is it still in-house? Is it still used? And if yes, who is responsible? So from an IT perspective and also from a business perspective. So how does that look like? I hope you can read it a little bit. So the first question basically is to say, you received that survey because, to our knowledge, you are responsible for the application. Is that true or not? So if the person would say no, then the next question would only be, please let us know who is responsible for it, in case you know. On the other side, if the person is responsible, then we would ask, is the application still relevant or not? And what you can see here already is you also have the possibility to do conditional questions. So based on the answer of one question, you can then have different following questions. So that was very simple, but always the idea, we just wanted to get the information quickly and to sort out the first things. Then we sent out the next survey where we wanted to get already more information. So like, again, the responsibilities. So that was now really going to already about 70 people. We wanted to make sure we are addressing the right people. Is it still relevant again? Is it a standard customized or individual developed application? Is the application name and description right? Because we had many applications where we really had no idea what it is. We were really searching around a lot, asking people. But often it was kind of, yeah, I know there is something, so let's leave it in, but we want to make sure we get it right here. Then also the topic of personal data, as Matthias mentioned already, GDPR, we wanted to see where do we have applications where we have personal data in. Java, I will also come to that a little bit later, topic Java commercialization. Identity and access management, also a couple of questions related to that. So is the usage of an application limited, and is there any need for action? As mentioned, that was a survey which was already sent out to around 70 people. So that's how that looked like. I'm not going into every detail here, but on the left side, you basically see all the questions, and on the right side, what we wanted to show here is anytime you have the possibility on the application itself, so on the fact sheet, if you open it, you will always have the possibility to see in which service has that application been included and how was it filled out. So that's very useful also after a couple of months. If you want to know, was the survey already sent out for that application, you would be able to get in there and see that. Yeah, what are the things why we did it, what we can do now? Sounds easy and very obvious, but what we have now really the information in one central place. So as already mentioned a couple of times today, we have now really one central list where we have our applications. We also have a description of an application, because you won't believe how often we have the question, there is an application in, what the hell is it? And we also try to maintain at least some links in there for further documentation, if we have already the link to the system itself, so if it's websites, for example. Responsibilities also used for addressing different questions. So the one side, we have an application who is responsible for that. So typically for a help desk, or if somebody is interested in getting more information about usage, whatever. And on the other side also, who is responsible for which applications. So if somebody is changing the department, is leaving the company, whatever, to have the possibility to find that. Yeah, customized standard individual, that's more in the direction of we try to replace individual developments with standard applications to have a possibility to find it out here. Topic Java commercialization, I guess also many have been affected by that. So as Java is not for free anymore and Oracle wanted to get some money for that, we also tried to get an inventory on which applications do we have in usage where Java is used. And I will show something more a little bit later here. The other topic that was mentioned already, luckily enough, also the security department saw a good potential here, what we can do. And they wanted to also get an overview on which system have we in-house where the usage is limited for an application. So like, is a user rights management implemented? Is it done within the application itself? Is it connected to Active Directory? Is there anything regarding roles implemented? And that was an activity that they had planned anyway, also around this in the last month, or in the last year, let me put it that way. And they came to us and asked if we could do that with them together. Yeah, personal data, that we did pretty easy at the moment, or very simple. We just said, okay, we're using two data objects, and one is just called personal data, and the other is called sensitive personal data. So at this point in time, we are not going even down to, is it like customer data or employees, whatever, but it helps us at least already to get an overview on that. Yeah, so just from these two surveys, what have been the benefits for us? So first of all, we could reduce the repository already. So we had the possibility to get rid of 100 applications in that list, where nobody would otherwise know if they're still used or not. And we really had a central place, a single source of truth to work together with the security team for the Java topic, GDPR and so on. And it really resulted in getting rid of a lot of Excel lists. Yeah, what else did we do then? We did a few more surveys and just picked out here two more. We always tried to make it really small, short surveys. So one was about the business information. We wanted to find out how critical are the different applications and how are they from a functional fit. And why did we do that? Because we wanted to get an overview on which critical systems do we have in-house, especially for maintenance windows, for disaster recovery purposes. If our data center would go down, in which sequence do we need to get up and running all the applications again? So that's very relevant for that. And also for our emergency manual, as Matthias mentioned already, we are partly critical infrastructure. And as such, we also have an emergency manual, which is pretty detailed. And also LeanIX is now a basis to get the applications in there. Java I mentioned already. Or one thing back to that business information, that was already a good test on our side, how the acceptance is of using the LeanIX service, because everything before was only sent to the IT, and that was the first survey which was also going to business people. So that means it was around 150, 160 recipients, and those primarily in the business departments. And that actually worked out pretty well. Java was something which we did IT internally again. That was kind of, we knew now which applications do we have in the house where Java is used. And we wanted to get a better overview, a better feeling on, can we use any alternatives? Is it, for example, possible to use Adopt OpenJDK? Are special versions required of Java? Yeah, with that, I'll give it over to Matthias again to talk a little bit what did we learn out of that.
Yeah, so basically, Christian showed us the details around the different surveys we ran so far. And what we tried to flesh out is here really our learnings we had using the service. So first of all, you can see we had a very high return rate. So I actually was surprised that also business people did not just ignore us, but also came back with answering the surveys. Also in terms of using, and I mentioned usability before, there were only few questions really related, how do I use the tool, or what do I need to basically follow to fill out the survey correctly? So that seems to work pretty easy. We've seen that before. It's also a good thing to keep it small and also make use of conditional questions so that you don't overload the survey and say only go down a certain path and open up another survey section if it's really required. If you, this is more for those knowing the LeanIX survey capabilities, so you can also include so-called fact sheet segments in a survey. So which means if you really want to update directly fields on the fact sheet, you can include them in the surveys, and then you do not have any subsequent work, because if the answer is going back, it will be directly updated into the repository. What is also very nice, you have this automatic email distribution. So once you have, like Christian said, your target groups defined, the recipients get the email notification to participate in the surveys. And also if something changes, because you have some selection criteria saying I want to send out a survey to certain employees, and something changes in that selection because there were updates done to the fact sheets, also those maybe additional participants will be automatically included, which is very nice. So also, I know it's a LeanIX conference, but still we also had some concerns, and I also want to talk about those. What we got sometimes is if you include fact sheet parts within your survey elements, that it was not always very intuitive for the users, because you have some multiple steps to take to really fill it out, and don't forget to save them. So that were some minor hiccups that we found there. And also, if you get back the answers to your surveys and they are not directly updating the fact sheets, keep in mind there is some subsequent work. So you get all these answers, but then basically you need to do some mass uploading into the fact sheet. So there is some work done. So this is also maybe, I think we heard it today, there are some enhancements coming for the survey functionality as well, but might be something to think about, that also updating of tags on fact sheets can be maybe done with the survey capability. Yeah, and maybe this is a minor thing. We have it in the appendix if you want to have a closer look maybe later. If you do some import, be careful, because also the combining or the name of the application also includes the application version. So there is some things you have to be careful before you upload the information again. What we also recommend, and this was some key learnings we had, the questions, of course, must be meaningful. So this is really always think about why are you asking that questions? What are you going to do with the results? This is it sounds simple and obvious, but keep that in mind. It only makes sense to collect information that really has a purpose, and you afterwards are going to do something with that information. Always try, and we've seen that it were a series of multiple surveys, and they were small. Try to keep them small, because basically people get that service on their desk, and they do that on top of the regular work. So it's better to say it's small, it's for a dedicated purpose, and they can fill it out quite rapidly. So this is also a recommendation we have. And what also happens sometimes, we ran into a situation, we send out the survey, and we say, well, there is no answer coming back, and we asked the colleague what happened, and said, well, there was something, but I just directly moved it into the trash. So I think it's good advice, inform people up front before the real survey comes out that there is a survey coming, and explain to them what's the context, why are you asking that, and give them some early up warning.
Good. So far about the usage of surveys. What we also wanted to quickly mention, we also integrated LeanIX with 2 systems right now, because we said, okay, it's great to get information out of the service, to get that from the people, but there are also a couple of things that we can get from other systems. One thing was integration of servers, which was actually quite a lengthy discussion, because we weren't sure if we want to do that, because we always thought server, that might also be CMDB, maybe it's not LeanIX the right place in our case. So we had, I think, hours of discussions around that. And also to give you some background, at EVN we are basically split into 2 big departments. We have the infrastructure team, and on the other side we have application and integration, where all the development is done. And let me put it that way, the communication might not be always the best. There is some room for improvement maybe. And the colleagues from the server teams always said, when we introduced LeanIX at the department meeting, that, hey, what about us? What about the servers? We are waiting for that already since years. And then we thought, okay, yeah, but still not sure if it makes sense in there. However, at a longer evening, we at some point said, then, okay, let's do that. And with that, the decision was basically made to say, okay, let's integrate that, because there are many advantages that we see. And so why do we want to have that in? So first of all, we often have the situation that the colleagues from the server team do not know who's responsible for a server. They get a request initially, but then with operations over time, nobody knows anymore what's installed on there, who is responsible, who is doing what. So that's one thing. Also, in case of if there are any server failures, if there are any upgrades, no matter if it's database or operating system, whatever happens, that they know what's impacted by that, which applications are impacted, which business processes, and so on. Yeah, and to timely identify the technical risks. In the previous session, it was also already mentioned, like outdated SQL Server versions or Windows Server 2008. It's great to have that information in LeanIX and to find quickly out where will you have an issue very soon. Yeah, why don't we want to maintain that manually? We have currently around 1,400 servers, and that's growing every day, basically. There are frequent changes, so every day getting new servers, the operating system upgrades, whatever. And we have that information already available in other systems, so by sure we wanted to not maintain it manually. So what do we do in that case? The source for our Windows servers is basically Microsoft SCCM, so the System Center Configuration Manager. That's where we get out the information for Windows. And the other piece that we have, Linux, is something which is more or less new for us. Let's put it that way. That's something with Linux we are not doing that much yet, but it's growing already. We have a monitoring solution where we have that information where we simply get it out at that point in time. So what did we want to get out? The main thing we wanted to know is what's the server name, what's the operating system running on there, and what's the status. Status does mean in that case, is it still alive or is it not available anymore? Is it decommissioned already? So this integration we do with GraphQL, and we are using an integration middleware that we have in-house. So it's basically on a daily basis, we are running a synchronization job that we develop manually. So good. So far, so good. So with that, since I think we introduced it 2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that, we had now the server in LeanIX, and many people were already happy with that because we had now the chance to at least maintain who's responsible for that. We got rid of another few Excel lists. But by sure, what was missing now is we needed to have the connection to which applications are running on the server. And that's something where we said we can't do that automatically. By sure, you could do with service discovery and things like that, but we just wanted to have that on a high level. We wanted to know which applications are running on there. We didn't need to know every single service. So again, for that, we used the survey feature and really send out to all the IT people who are responsible for an application. We sent out the survey and said, please fill in the servers as IT components so that we have the connection between server and application, that we know that we can answer those questions. So that worked out pretty well as well. So we have, I think, now a good basis for further discussions on that. Based on that, security again came to us and they said, hey, we want to introduce our vulnerability system management software again. So it's basically a software which scans our network, takes any IP-based device and scans it for vulnerabilities. So what they would have at the end is a long list of vulnerabilities. They know what's the server, what's the vulnerability, but that might be quite a lot. And so they don't know where should we start fixing things. So they said, okay, you have the information now in LeanIX, you have the servers, we have the applications. For the applications, we have the information from the business department, which ones are critical. And that's information that they would like to feed into their system. So that's again something where we used GraphQL to integrate, to get out the information from LeanIX and provide that to the vulnerability management software. In that case, it's just an easy thing where we said, okay, we'll take a PowerShell script which sends in a request, which gets out all the servers and applications out, puts that into a CSV file, and that's it. So that's not rocket science. Also put it up here, but that's pretty hard to read. If you're interested in that, just let us know. It's basically what we do. We wrote a pretty generic PowerShell script where we say, okay, we have a configuration file where we put in our API token, proxy information. Then the script only goes there and it gets the access token from LeanIX. Then it builds the GraphQL request, and that's where we made it generic in terms of, we said, there's the request file, the whole JSON request or the GraphQL request is in that file. Take it as it is, send it over, take the response and put it somewhere in the file system. In that case, it's also the JSON response that they use. In some cases, we're using it also now and do some further work on that to get out CSV files. Yeah, that's it so far from the integration perspective, and there's some takeaways that Matthias will.
Yeah, I think most of them, we touched on them, but still very important. Like I said, you can't manage that with a small team, so collaboration definitely is key. Talk to each other, convince them, and show them the benefits and what I mean here, and that's important for their roles. So it's very important to say, this is really the benefit you are getting out of the system. This is not just for us, so the enterprise architecture team, this is also helpful for yourself. I said it before, you have to live with the fact it's never going to be 100% complete, never. This only makes you unhappy, it will not work, but try to improve it over time and try to stay on top of it, but it's never done. And tool support is very essential. It's important that people like to work with it, that it's easy to use. And I think we're also looking forward to some new features coming so that we can offer them building up some dashboards they need specific to the questions they have to the different applications. And for us, it's also key, and what is really very, very beneficial and was good, is to say this is the one and only repository we go to when we have questions, and I think we are almost there. So we have more and more occasions where people say, wasted information, and we say, well, there's only one answer, and this is LeanIX, and that's where you find that information. If it's not in there, then it's not there. Okay, so with that, want to wrap it up, and if there are questions, please.
First of all, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Da ist das Mikro.
you.
How you can work with LeanIX Surveys, thanks to Matthias and Christian. And we still have some minutes left, 5 minutes left before coffee breaks. So let's wrap it up with some questions. So far, we always had some questions that wanted to be answered. Yeah, you can push the button.
First, thank you for your insights. You talked about data quality and completeness, and my question is there any way you know or you use to measure completeness or quality, and can you show that you improve?
That's a great question. First of all, for the completeness, what we definitely see is you also have in LeanIX the functionality to say which fields you want to have filled out there, and you can also see by percentage how much is filled out there. So that's something that we are tracking. At least we say our basis is the application list that we have in now, so that's the best we know, to be honest. So with our, let's say, around 700 applications, we cannot say it's in the truth as 800. I agree with that, we don't know that, but at least for the 700 we can say pretty sure how much information we have them there so far. So that's the best we do so far. Not sure if you have anything to add there.
I think you mentioned it. You can basically define, so if you look at the fact sheet information for an application, for instance, there are many fields, and what we said is really try to shrink it or keep it to the information we really can maintain and where there's a very high likelihood that we get the answers back. And this is something where you can also define or adjust LeanIX to say, well, you can measure how complete a certain fact sheet is based upon your criteria. So you can say, well, if it's only those set of fields and they are filled out, then you're good. So this is basically one measurement. And the other thing is that we also start using the quality seals, which is another way that you say, okay, once it's done, it's already outdated. So it means that you have to keep in mind how do you refresh the information so that the quality seals are going to break again, and you need someone to reconfirm that information. Yeah.
Okay, let's put it like that. We go from this side over to that one. So 3 questions, and then time is over.
Yeah, thank you also for your talk. I'm quite impressed by your very high return rates. I would very happy to have them as well. Can you maybe share some more insights how you achieve that besides keeping the survey short and informing the recipients upfront?
Also a good question, because the main things were really, what we always hear from the people is, I don't have any time to do anything. So that's especially, but as you mentioned already, that's with keeping the surveys short, having the conditional questions. What we do in addition, what we maybe did not mention, is also that we really send at least 1, 2, 3 reminders also to the people to say after a week, please fill out that survey. Interesting enough, we did not really use the management a lot in that case. We just once within the IT told our manager it would be great if just at the department meeting that he would mention it would be good to support that initiative. Probably that helped as well. Interesting enough, on the business side, we did not do anything else than what mentioned already. And that worked really pretty out very well. It's just not the full answer. I hope it helps a little bit. But
Interestingly enough, business people had a higher response rate than IT people.
Mm.
So maybe that's not a surprise.
So thank you very much, Matthias and Christian. My question would be, how frequently do you address your users with surveys? So every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks? So what is your experience? What works best?
Mm-hmm. For the ones we did now, I would say it's about every 2 months, 1.5 to 2 months. It's not more often than that. So we also try to not bother people too often, but I think with close to 2 months, that seemed to be okay so far.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we can use servers to add information to the fact sheet, but I have no idea we can't control the removal of information, perhaps a subscription IT owner or responsibles. Do you have an idea that we can control the removal of information?
So you mean that people simply go in there, take out themselves and...
Yes, from the responsible.
Mhm.
So there's no responsible anymore for application.
That's a great question. I mean, what we do, but that's very on an irregular basis, is that we look into the system and have a look, are there any fact sheets where nobody is responsible for, but it's also not the best solution, I think. That's the best we do right now.
Thanks.
Sorry for not having a better answer. Yeah, sometimes the best answer is the truth, but anyway, we would like to continue, first of all, saying thank you to you, Christian and Matthias. Thank you for being part at Europe's leading enterprise architecture conference.